Coming up, we have a special report on the wheat crisis. We track the event across the globe and bring it to you just in time for a related International Calendar Day. Stay here to find out more. Hello and welcome to Economy Report. I'm Garth Mortensen in Beijing. For anyone that doesn't know, October 16th is World Food Day. To mark it, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN is holding a conference. It could be one of the most important meetings in the world. Already it says more than 1 billion people are undernourished. Every year, 6 million children die from malnutrition or related diseases. Economy Report also decided to mark World Food Day with a special report on the wheat crisis. We traversed the entire globe to bring you this story. Born in Russia, heavily speculated over in the U.S., and sparking protests in Africa, the issue is of truly international importance, and the crisis still plays on.
Last week, the Ukraine made headlines when it blocked wheat exports to ensure domestic supplies. And the International Monetary Fund just lowered Russia's 2010 growth forecast on account of drought and the resultant lost trading opportunities. Russia says its total damages stand at $1.3 billion.
We start our investigation of the global wheat crisis about 500 kilometers east of Moscow in the central black soil region. It's the breadbasket of Russia, which is usually the world's third leading wheat exporter.
You'd never guess it, but these calm fields are the epicenter of today's problems. Continuous drought and fire have ravaged its countryside and slashed grain production since April. It's been the country's worst drought in more than a century. Estimates are at least 1/3 of Russia's harvest was destroyed. Russia's agriculture ministry has lowered this year's grain forecast far below last year's 97 million tons. It now lies between 60 and 65 million tons. In response, benchmark wheat prices embarked on an upward race. Heavy turbulence in the grain market then followed. In order to curb the rise of local prices, Russia's Prime Minister Vladimir Putin announced the suspension of grain exports until next year's harvest.
Moscow has adopted a series of price controls to address its shortage, but still 13 million tons of grain remains lacking. Farmers who are at the root of this crisis face more urgent matters. Newly added costs are being written onto their farm bills, and it's not clear when the next harvest will arrive.
Already, there are so many places to spend money. Loans, fuel, wages. It affected them all. It will be very difficult next year, too, so we're hoping the state can help us.
The government will offer almost $1.2 billion of farm aid to help steady prices. About 1/3 of those funds will go to farmers hassle-free, with remaining offered as 3-year privileged credit.
Most of the government financing is allocated to stock breeding and the rest for plantation. We've got tax preference on agriculture, value-added tax is 18% on industry and only 10% on agriculture. There hasn't been any profit tax on agriculture so far. This policy will last until 2012 and will insist on that.
But the drought didn't isolate itself within Russian borders. The Ukraine and Kazakhstan, two other leading wheat producers, have also seen crops wither away in the heat. The three countries together provide 1/4 of the world's wheat exports. Compounding the matter, other major growers suffered crop losses as well. Canada lost some due to heavy rains. India, Pakistan and China were affected by floods. And locusts swarmed over Australia.
As news headline readings became more pessimistic, so did the market. Feverish traders kept buying contracts as prices rose. To find out how the crisis is playing out in the market, we traveled to Chicago, home of the world's busiest commodities exchange. In this trading pit, we can get a good view of how prices are being determined. Our correspondent Li Mi went to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange in search of answers.
The wheat futures on Chicago Board of Trade has surged more than 80% since late June on speculations that the adverse weather in world-leading wheat exporters like Russia and the Black Sea region has heavily reduced their wheat production. And today we have invited Mr. Michael Siri from SiriFutures.com to talk about the wheat price rally. And good morning, Mr.
Good morning,
Siri.
Nice to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Sure.
And my first question is, What are the factors behind the price surge of wheat futures? And in your opinion, will it go higher in the short term?
I think the highs are in personally, but what happened was Russia had that drought, and they stopped exporting their wheat. And when they're the third largest producer or exporter of wheat, and when a large country like that stops exporting, well, that sends some ripples through the market, and that's why we went up to $8.50.
So except the adverse weather in the world leading wheat exporters, and do you think what else has caused the price surge, like the speculation?
Some speculators, what is happening is the feed grains, and a feed grain is like corn or soy meal or wheat or oats. When one went crazy, now the other ones are all catching up, because you can't have $8 wheat prices and $3.50 corn prices. Something's going to happen. Either wheat's going to come down or corn is going to rally up. But this was strictly because of the drought in Russia, nothing else. So it was one section of the world that made this go up.
So you think that weather is the dominating factor behind the rally?
Correct. Also the U.S. dollar, the exporting, when the dollar goes lower, it helps commodity prices go up as well. So you have a weak dollar, you have a Russia drought, we have tight supplies. So right now, these prices are going to stay up here for a while until we see a new harvest come in. And then they know, well, this is a good crop, then they'll start selling the wheat.
For Russia, the threat of losing longtime buyers is starting to emerge, as the export ban is expected to last at least 1 year. Countries that once went to Russia for wheat must now search elsewhere, such as the United States or France, but it's Egypt that stands in the middle of this shift.
It imports more wheat than everyone else, but Russia's export ban let Egypt out in the cold. Egypt used to depend on Russia for almost 60% of those supplies. The country currently only has a 4-month stockpile of wheat to feed local markets. It now has to scavenge up 540,000 tons of wheat that were scheduled for delivery on September 10th. Every month, the government must import 60,000 tons of wheat. But immediately after Moscow completed its move, Cairo responded.
Yesterday, we purchased 240,000 tons of wheat from French sources. There was a tender at the General Authority for Supply Commodities, or GASC, where 17 offers were submitted with quantities that amounted to 1 million tons of wheat. 4 of them, belonging to French companies, were approved to provide 240,000 tons of wheat.
Apart from France, who else can satisfy Egypt's demand for wheat for the long run? We asked Egypt's General Authority for Supplying Commodities. It's been assigned with the task of providing basic commodities for citizens and maintaining food security.
For this situation, we tried to make some tenders buy wheat from different countries, including France, Canada, and Germany. However, the German and Canadian are in the same crisis, only the French market, which is still very strong, because it has large numbers of crops for exporting this year. And all the markets have shifted to the French and American market.
Millions of Egyptians rely on subsidized wheat products like bread as their staple food. Anxiety and discontent about the shortages and rising prices have spread among the public. Our reporters in Cairo hit the streets to hear what people really have to say about the situation.
Exporters began to renege on their commitments to countries such as Egypt. This is a result of the decline in production they underwent due to the wildfire and other reasons. This, of course, had a negative effect on Egypt, which has reserves that are only enough for 2, 3, or 4 months at maximum. It will take no less than 1 or 2 months for the government to reach new agreements. This, of course, has a negative impact on both distribution and productivity of wheat products. As a result, bakeries, no matter subsidized or unsubsidized, are facing supply shortage as prices keep going up.
But bakeries can't absorb all the price hikes. They'll have to eventually pass them on to consumers. If so, more changes are bound to follow.
The wheat crisis causes a supply shortage in flour and drives up food prices, which is absolutely unacceptable to the customer. Because of the supply shortage, we sell far less than usual and make no profit. Consumers are also victims of the crisis.
Just before the holy month of Ramadan, dozens of Egyptians joined a sit-down in front of the Egyptian cabinet. Holding plates and spoons, they protested against price hikes for daily necessities.
My colleagues and I came here in front of the cabinet to protest in a civilized and peaceful way. We hope the government can control the prices, which are spiraling to a high level as the month of Ramadan is approaching. We do not know how to get through this month.
Their people sacked food distribution warehouses in order to eat. Eventually, the government accepted the public's demands for lower food prices and is now deliberating ways to boost agricultural production. Developed countries with their higher incomes can fairly easily overcome food price spikes when they appear, but not developing countries. Commodity markets are changing under new World Trade Organization pressure. Biofuels are eating into agricultural yields and possibly pushing prices up alongside. Also, as world incomes grow, people start eating more meat. The tons of grains that went to feed people now go to animals, which render far less food on the table.
The last major food scare lasted from 2007 to 2008 and took into account all of these factors. For this part of the story, we went to Rome to speak with the FAO secretary of the Intergovernmental Group of Grains. We asked him if today's crisis is merely an echo of the past.
Basically, what we have as a situation is quite different to the one we had in 2008. On the supply side, Russia is a major problem. It is very much understood. But there are other exporters which can easily meet the shortfall simply because they have huge inventories. This was not the case back in 2008, where a number of major exporting countries, producing countries had problems, but the others who were going to make up for it didn't have inventories. So the fact that we have a reasonably good level of inventories means that this time around, and at least for one season, if we could say that, we should be all right with the wheat market. Second of all, the problem is very much, as you have noticed, is isolated to wheat sector. It's not really a problem of cereals. Rice market is not really in any sort of a difficult situation, as evident in the prices. The corn market, in fact, is expecting a good crop in the U.S. There has been some upward pressure, but for a number of factors, it always happens this time as we enter a critical period of growing season in the northern hemisphere countries. The soybean sector and others also do not seem to be sharing the same sort of a negative problems that they had back in the 2007 and 8. On the demand side, there is also a significant difference between what is happening now and what happened a few years back. The macroeconomic, there is more of a discussion of a deflation and deceleration of growth rather than in a strong, let's say, expansion in terms of demand. So this basically means that on the demand side, we don't have the same accelerators as we had a few years ago. This is also evident in the price of petroleum, and as we know, one of the leading factors to higher prices back a few years ago was the double-digit petroleum prices. Petroleum is struggling to maintain around the $80. This is about almost as half as it was a few years ago. So these factors means that also on the demand side, we are not seeing such a huge expectation. Therefore, it is really unlikely that we find ourselves in another food crisis this year.
At a high-level FAO meeting September 24th, he also stressed that it was still a delicate moment for the international market's volatility and price increases.
A slump in the world economy and external factors, such as massive speculation and currency movements, bring added uncertainty. After the U.S. subprime mortgage crisis broke on financial markets, a huge amount of speculative funds flowed to lower-risk agricultural commodities, pushing up food prices.
Despite all the talk of international trade and market factors, the basic fact is that food is something we all need. This is why the Food and Agriculture Organization considers adequate food a basic universal right. It's meeting today to bring that right to everyone. Thanks for watching Economy Report. I'm Garth Mortensen in Beijing.